Support comes from St. Louis Public Library Foundation, helping the library serve children and their families with programs and services needed to become lifelong readers. More information about the foundation is at slpl.org.
From St. Louis Public Radio. This is the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air. I'm Jason Rosenbaum. It's now been a week since legislators passed a measure to make it much harder to approve some constitutional amendments that will ultimately need voter approval in 2026. Missouri lawmakers also approved a new congressional map aimed at ousting Democratic Congressman Emanuel Cleaver. Now that I've had some time and distance from covering the special session in Jefferson City, I've come to two separate conclusions. First is that Governor Mike Kehoe's special session often felt like it was on autopilot. Absolutely no one was surprised when the GOP supermajority passed the redistricting plan, converting Cleaver's Kansas City-based district into a GOP-leaning seat. And there was no suspense whatsoever that Republicans would back a plan requiring constitutional amendments put on the ballot through the initiative petition process to pass statewide and in all of the state's 8 congressional districts. For Republican State Senator Nick Schroer of St. Charles County, the special session spoke volumes about GOP cohesion, especially when infighting played such a major role recently in derailing legislative priorities.
Well, it feels good that the Republican Party is finally coming together. The personal attacks seem to be no more. We've got all branches of government kind of working together, the federal branches and the state branches, on moving a map to the governor's desk that represents more of Missouri values.
Here's my other conclusion. Yes, the special session was predictable, but it was also noteworthy because the General Assembly broke a slew of norms and precedents. There are a lot of examples. Let's start with the redistricting plan itself. The map that splits Kansas City into 3 congressional districts passed the House and Senate without a single alteration. Literally. Nothing changed from the time it was introduced to the point when it was sent to Kehoe's desk. By contrast, Republicans quarreled mightily in 2011 and 2022 to get a redistricting proposal past the finish line. It's clear why this happened. President Donald Trump is pressuring GOP states like Missouri to redraw their congressional lines before the 2026 election cycle. And while some lawmakers sought to downplay Trump's influence, Republicans like State Representative Justin Sparks of St. Louis County bluntly stated he was voting for the map to prevent the Democrats from taking over the U.S. House.
My constituents have said it loud and clear that they fear for their children's future because of insane policies of the left, and that is the real reason we're here.
And while GOP infighting and dissension did not slow the map's trajectory, there were some notable opponents of the redistricting plan. Republican House Speaker John Patterson and now former Senate Appropriations Committee Chairman Lincoln Huff voted against it. Patterson's dissent is especially notable since House speakers have the ability to kill things they don't like. The Lee Summit Republican, though, did nothing to stop the new map from going to the Senate, nor did he get in the way of perhaps the most restrictive plan ever introduced against Missouri's initiative petition process.
I didn't think my constituents would be in favor of that, or the majority of them, and I just tried to represent them to the best of my ability, and that's why I voted the way I did, but I'm happy that other people got to vote the way their constituents want, and ultimately both were successful.
The universal disapproval of Missouri's Black Caucus to the redistricting proposal also shattered recent precedent. In 2011 and 2022, some African-American lawmakers voted for maps, primarily because they protected Cleaver and the St. Louis and St. Louis County-based 1st Congressional District. But not this year. African-American Democrats from Kansas City raised alarm about the legislature attacking Cleaver, who was the first black mayor in that city's history. And State Representative Lakeisha Bosley of St. Louis condemned the addition of largely white suburbs to the 1st District.
Let's call these maps what they are. They are racist. Period. Full stop. And every one of you are going to probably sit there and pat yourselves on the back. Oh, she's crazy. Oh, she's fear-mongering. Oh, this is race baiting. No, you are the ones causing the race baiting. You're the ones getting people amped up and ready to go.
Significantly diluting the African American population of the 1st District is illegal since it's covered under the Voting Rights Act. And while Republicans say the new district still has at least a plurality African American population, detractors say there's no way to know for sure since the map uses outdated census data. And then there was the Missouri Senate.
Order in the chamber, please.
We don't have any rules. How do we get?
Let's please get order in the chamber.
There is no rule. You got something to say for the vote? What for? You're out of order.
Please continue.
There are no rules. You allow.
Senate Republicans have used a filibuster stopping maneuver known as the previous question more frequently, including in May to target voter-approved abortion rights and paid sick leave requirements. But last week was the first time they deployed the previous question just to pass rules, and that made it more difficult for Democrats to slow down the special sessions proceedings. When the time came to debate the proposal to curb some initiative petition plans, Republicans didn't provide a chance for anyone to speak. They called the previous question, approved of sending the plan to voters in 2026, and gavelled out of session. Senate Minority Leader Doug Beck of St. Louis County did not hold back from expressing contempt for what his Republican counterparts did.
They're cheating to cheat because their ideas suck. Their policies are terrible for everybody, and they want to hold on to power. Everybody knows me. I'm not like this. I am not like this, but I see the death of the Senate in Missouri, and it's frustrating to watch this happen.
What's striking about all of this is that Missouri Republicans altered all these norms and changed all of these well-established procedures to pass 2 pieces of legislation that may never get enacted. The plan to make it much harder for some constitutional amendments to pass requires a successful statewide vote. And Sam Licklatter of the Missouri Association of Realtors told lawmakers last week that his organization is mobilizing against it.
We're currently planning our actions for the election. We have somewhere in the neighborhood of 8,317,000, so we're well positioned to ensure our arguments reach the public. We've used the initiative petition twice. We believe it is crucial to retain it in case we feel there are additional changes needed in the future.
Missouri AFL-CIO President Jake Hummel said last week that members of organized labor groups are absolutely incensed about the initiative petition plan.
My phone's been ringing off the hook. My emails are constant. They are angry. And quite frankly, I look forward to calling Mr. Licklatter on Friday and having a discussion about beating this at the ballot.
The realtors and labor unions say they have good reason to be opposed to curbing the initiative petition process. Since the proposal still allows constitutional amendments the legislature puts before voters to pass with just a majority vote, both groups fear that the Republican supermajority legislature could try to enact ballot initiatives that are harmful to the real estate industry or members of organized labor. Meanwhile, the new redistricting plan is facing several lawsuits, which will likely take a while to work their way up to the Missouri Supreme Court. And because the new lines did not receive enough support in the House or the Senate to go into effect right away, redistricting opponents are gathering signatures to put the map up for a statewide vote. The prospect of a redistricting referendum provided a jolt of enthusiasm for Missourians who flocked to the Capitol last week to protest the special session. That included Frida Tucker, a Jefferson City resident who really doesn't like the new map.
I don't know what the answer is. I don't even like politics, okay? I just know we need transparency. We need to stop the power grab. We need, at least, we don't need to do it every 3 years, okay? Something's not right here.
Sullivan resident Glenn Kagi, a longtime union official, said the map would have a chance of getting rejected at the ballot box, even though voters have elected GOP candidates in statewide positions.
Missouri will vote to be fair. They want fairness over the political way the Republicans are doing it.
But even if the redistricting plan and the initiative petition curbs falter, the fallout in the Missouri General Assembly could last a lot longer than people think. Some Democrats in the Senate are already planning on making the 2026 legislative session miserable for their GOP colleagues. And for Representative Cleaver, the man who Republicans are spending so much time and energy trying to oust, he says Missourians will feel the harm caused by the past month's session linger for the foreseeable future.
In the last few years, chaos has been on a hunt, hunting all over this country, and chaos has found us. It has finally found us. We're going to fight each other in the greatest nation that God allowed to exist. When we don't have to do this.
We need to take a quick break. When we return, we'll dig into the efforts to defeat the new congressional map in court and at the ballot box with Denise Lieberman of the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition. This is the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air. Welcome back to the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air. I'm Jason Rosenbaum. Missouri's new congressional map is facing challenges on two different fronts. The first is an effort to gather more than 100,000 signatures to put the revised lines up for a statewide vote. The other involves legal challenges in Jackson and Cole counties. And while redistricting detractors are focusing on how lawmakers drew the state's 8 congressional districts, the question that could ultimately upend the map is if legislators have the authority to engage in mid-decade redistricting. And if the Missouri Supreme Court says no, then Missouri's 2025 redistricting gambit will have been all for naught. Joining us now to break down the fight against the redistricting proposal is Denise Lieberman. The St. Louis City resident is Director and General Counsel at the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition. She testified against the redistricting plan as well as the proposal to curb the initiative petition process earlier this month in Jefferson City. Denise, welcome to the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start off with a clip from House Budget Committee Chairman Dirk Deaton, who handled the redistricting plan in the House. In his remarks last Tuesday, the McDonald County Republican correctly predicted the redistricting opponents were going to file lawsuits over the new map.
And then further, before we even produce a map, promise that they'll see us in court. And so civilly or criminally, we're going to get you. We won't let the people of Missouri vote. We're going to do it in the courts. And I think that's a sad indictment of where we are. This is a better map. And democracy is in action here today because the people's representatives who have been duly elected are going to get to vote.
That was House Budget Committee Chairman Dirk Deaton, a McDonald County Republican who sponsored the redistricting measure in the House. Denise, why is this redistricting plan worth challenging in court?
Well, Jason, Missouri's Constitution makes abundantly clear that redistricting is tied to the census, and that's why we do it every 10 years. The idea of redistricting is to take account of population shifts so that we can adjust district lines as needed to ensure that every district, congressional district, has approximately the same population as the others, and to ensure that communities are kept intact. Our Constitution makes clear that only when that new census data is certified to the governor, then the legislators shall draw those new congressional maps.
The constitutional provision that you just referenced doesn't specifically mention a prohibition on redistricting several years after a census, say in 2025. Why do you think courts will ultimately interpret the absence of that language as a prohibition and not an authorization for mid-decade redistricting?
Well, Jason, courts look first to the plain meaning of the words. And here there's a very direct correlation that when the census data is provided, that then the map shall be drawn. And so there's a very clear connection that the maps can be drawn only when that census data comes in. But there's other reasons as well. The argument that's being raised by members of the legislature simply doesn't make sense. It would open the door to allowing the legislature to redistrict every single year and us never knowing when what the maps are going to be. But the key point here is that it's tied to population shifts because the duty of lawmakers to redistrict is about ensuring one person, one vote, ensuring that congressional districts are about all the same in population. It's about ensuring that communities come together. And without new data, and we know, for example, that there's been a surge in population in Kansas City, in some St. Louis County suburbs, the map simply wouldn't be reflective of the current population trends.
So you mentioned Republican arguments for this map. You are correct. They are arguing that this is a legal thing to do. And one of the people who feels that the Constitution does authorize mid-decade redistricting is State Representative Bill Hardwick. He's a Pulaski County Republican, and he made that argument while talking with me earlier this month.
Exclusio unis is an actual concept, but exclusio unis means that if you omit the mention of one thing, it means that you're not authorized to do that thing. Exclusio unis typically applies when there's a series. Like if I say the legislature has the power to legislate about desk and couch and chairs and doors, that would imply the legislature doesn't have the authority to legislate about windows, right? It's a series and something's omitted from a series. The way that Article 25 reads, or the way that the Section 25 reads, it's not a series that omits. It says thereafter the census, so after the census. So if I want to say the letter of the law technically, are we reapportioning after the census? Yes. Does it make sense that there are no times which the legislature can come back and amend that statute after they passed it? No.
That was State Representative Bill Hardwick, a Republican from Pulaski County. Denise, you actually, I think, heard that argument in a committee hearing. What's your response to the representative?
Well, that's not the correct way to look at the constitutional language. There's also a provision of legislative construction that says, hey, if the legislature has granted explicit authority in one part of the Constitution and neglects to do so in the other part of the Constitution, those have to be read in harmony. And our lawmakers, our Constitution does allow for mid-decade redistricting for state level, so state representatives, state Senate seats.
Which, by the way, Deaton tried to make an argument that in and of itself is an authorization for congressional redistricting.
It's not. It's under the section of the Constitution that explicitly covers just state level redistricting. And, there's a lot of ways that state redistricting is different than federal. In our state level redistricting, for example, we have a redistricting commission. Those maps have to be drawn in public. There have to be public hearings. That's not true with congressional redistricting. Legislators can draw those maps. Here, those maps were drawn in complete, in back rooms. It was not done in public. And the Constitution says something different. It does not include that language that is explicitly included, allowing state lines to be revisited from time to time. And the broader point here, responding to the senator's remarks, is that lawmakers already complied with the constitutional mandate. When the census data, the 2020 census data, was certified to the governor in 2021, lawmakers did, in fact, go about the process of congressional redistricting, in fact, rejecting the very kind of 7-to-1 map that they passed last week in the legislature. And they went and passed a 6-2 map.
And by the way, I don't think I explained this in the intro, but a 7-1 map refers to a plan that would make Emanuel Cleaver's 5th district in Kansas City Republican leaning. The 6-2 map keeps it Democratic leaning, but continue.
Right. And let's remember that existing map, the 6-2 map, was already heavily gerrymandered. Democrats make up about 40% of Missouri's population and yet only had 25% of its representation. And now, with the intent to strip the district in Kansas City and split it up, you're looking at less than 20% of that population.
Before I move on to the next legal argument against the map, what would be your response to people like Hardwick and other Republicans who say, if the constitutional provision in question doesn't allow for mid-decade redistricting, then it creates a situation where lawmakers wouldn't be able to revise a map that's struck down in court, say, in 2024 or 2025?
Well, that's simply untrue. Obviously, a court order that finds that when the legislature did its constitutional obligation, like they did in 2022, to pass the maps after redistricting, if those maps still have to comply with the law. Right. And our Constitution requires that those maps be as compact as possible, that they keep communities intact, that they honor the provision of one person, one vote. And so if they don't do that, a court can say this map is illegal, you have to redraw it. But that's the only circumstance. It's not a situation where lawmakers just on a whim can get a redo. And that's what they're asking for here. They have complied with the constitutional obligation to draw those maps after the 2020 census, and they did so in 2022. And they don't get a redo just because they have a political whim to do so in 2025. They'll have a full opportunity to revisit these maps when the 2030 census data comes out and draw maps that reflect the changing population of Missouri.
Do you think that another argument that could be used is the provision in the constitutional amendment we're talking about that says that districts have to be as equal population as may be? Since we're talking about census data used for this map that is at least 4 years old, there is really no way to ever figure out if that standard is breached.
Right, and that's one reason that we do redistricting every 10 years after the census, in order to ensure that the maps reflect the most accurate data. No new data was provided that would trigger that legislative obligation here, and that's one reason that these maps should be struck down.
I spoke with Travis Crum, who is a law professor at Washington University. He told me he did not find the argument that the map violates the equal population requirements in the Missouri Constitution to be a particularly compelling reason to strike it down in court.
The best data that we have when it comes to population distribution is the census. We do other things like the ACS survey in between the decennial censuses, but they are not as accurate and they are not as granular as the census data. Secondly, the one person, one vote rule is kind of a legal fiction in that we draw the maps at the beginning of the decade and then they're in place for the entire decade. And obviously people move over the course of a decade and cities grow in population and shrink in population, but you don't see successful one person, one vote challenges filed in years ending in 8 or 9, even though those maps are obviously outdated at that point. And then finally, redistricting litigation takes a long time. The congressional redistricting case out of Alabama just had a huge ruling earlier this summer, and they're going to take that up to the Supreme Court. So that might not get finalized until sometime next year. And just because we don't have more recent census data doesn't mean that the state is now in a position where it just can't redistrict in response to a violation of the Voting Rights Act.
That was Washington University School of Law professor Travis Crum talking about the contention that the new Missouri congressional map violates state equal population requirements. What is your response to that clip?
Well, I mean, he's right in that we don't have any new data. So these maps have to look at the 2020 census data and determine whether those meet the legal and constitutional requirements. But one thing we can see is that this map is clearly not compact. It's clearly not contiguous. And in that sense, it violates provisions of the Missouri Constitution that sets forth that you have to keep these district lines as compact as possible. When you split a single community of Kansas City, which is clearly an intact community, into 3 pieces and include some members of Kansas City in the same congressional district as farmers on the Illinois and Iowa border.
Which, by the way, was the case. I mean, I hate to be pedantic here, but that was the case with the old map because all of Platte County was in the 6th district. So I want to make that clear, but continue.
Right, but now what you're doing is really splitting up the actual community of Kansas City, Missouri, yes. Right? And including it, splitting it in thirds and including it with rural populations and dorms at University of Missouri all across the state, and really splitting up the neighborhoods that make Kansas City the city we all know and love, and create the culture and the areas of interest that many of us appreciate about Kansas City.
I want to shift to the referendum. A group called People Not Politicians is in the process of collecting 100,000 signatures to put the map up for a vote in November 2026. Can you just talk a little bit about how this process works?
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of confusion about it. Well, the Missouri Constitution says that when lawmakers pass a law, and these maps are a piece of legislation, Missourians can, by gathering sufficient signatures within 90 days, petition to recall that law. And that is the petition that was filed on Friday as the Missouri legislature passed these maps. And the trigger for passing this type of referendum is the passage of the law by the Missouri legislature. So signature gathering has begun. There was a bit of a back and forth with the Secretary of State's office.
And I'll chime in here. Republican Secretary of State Denny Hoskins initially rejected it because Keogh hadn't signed the bill into law, but he reversed course over the weekend. It's now being examined by the Missouri Attorney General's office and State Auditor's office. I wouldn't be shocked if Hoskins eventually did reject it based off this idea that it has to be signed into law. I talked with Chuck Hatfield. He disagrees with that interpretation. Sorry, I'm a little tongue-tied this afternoon, but he and you are both involved in a Cole County case over
That's
this.
Right.
But can you talk about Hoskins' potential interpretation that this bill has to be signed before referendum starts?
It's simply inconsistent with the plain meaning of Missouri's law. It states that when the legislature passes legislation, that triggers the ability of Missouri citizens to try to recall it. And that's exactly what's happening here. And there are even court decisions that have affirmed that interpretation. And otherwise, right, the governor who maybe disagrees with the citizen action could hijack the process because he's got 45 days in which to sign or veto legislation.
And there is speculation that Kehoe hasn't signed the map because he is hoping that the courts rule that, the referendum can't start until the governor signs the law, and then you frittered away 45 days. But as you mentioned, this group, People Not Politicians, is gathering signatures right now. So they're banking on the opposite happening, basically, correct?
Yeah, I mean, this campaign is going to kick off over the weekend, and signature gathering is going to kick off in full force. It's a short period of time, 90 days, to get the well over 100,000 signatures that are going to be necessary to place this measure on the ballot. And once that happens, those maps are on hold. They're not allowed to be enforced until the people have the opportunity to vote on whether to recall them.
Now, my understanding is the governor cannot move this election date, but the General Assembly can, because the General Assembly moved the referendum from right to work from November 2018 to August 2018.
Right.
Now, but this is where it gets really interesting and tricky. The only way for this map to ever go into effect before the 2026 election cycle is to move it to March or April, which is, I can't remember the last time there was a statewide election there. And I also think, this is my last question for you, do you think moving the election outside of August or November could actually make it more likely for Missourians to reject the map, because the people who may be coming out are the most informed voters, and there are a lot of well-informed voters who are really upset about this new map.
Yeah, and what we know data-wise is that Missourians are overwhelmingly opposed to these maps. Americans are overwhelmingly opposed to mid-cycle redistricting done solely for political purposes. And so we know that there is a very strong amount of opposition to rigging these systems. Missouri's the show me state, and Missourians believe that they should be the ones electing the representatives, not the other way around. Representatives here are just very plainly and openly said they were going to manipulate the district lines for their own political gain, and no other reason, and weren't afraid to break up a community, a thriving community, in order to do it. Now, the governor could place the measure so the measure will go on the November 26th ballot. The governor could place it on another statewide election like the August election, but to do it in March or April would require them to call a special election, which is quite expensive. So it's possible, but I think it would rile the ire of Missouri voters even further to know that they were going to have to shell out millions of their tax dollars to place this on a special election.
Denise Lieberman is the Director and General Counsel for the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition. For all of our coverage of the redistricting and initiative petition saga, be sure to go to stlpr.org. Denise, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Today's episode was produced by Jason Rosenbaum.
Audio engineering and sound design by Aaron Dorr.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations. And leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thanks.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Larico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.